afternoon, everyone. Welcome all y'all to Texas. How many of you are from Texas? Really? I see a Buc-ee's sweatshirt over here. You're not from Texas?
Not anymore. I am from Texas, but I live in Colorado.
Okay, who's lived in Texas at some point? Well, it's nice to have you here in our great state. James Creedon talking about implementing new processes and technology at midsize and large law firms. And let's just start off at the beginning by thinking about what do we mean by midsize and large law firms. I don't think we focus on numbers. We talk more about, do we have enough people that we're no longer seeing each other day in and day out, seeing all the faces? Another way I think about it is, can we all sit in a conference room, or are we larger than that? Now, the firm that I'm at is Scale LLP. We're at approximately 85 lawyers as of this month. We're continuing to grow, like hopefully many of you are growing. And my job at Scale is to help think about, in part, some of the technologies that we're implementing, how to make life better for the lawyers at our firm. And so as we get into this conversation today, I'd like you to think about these steps and think about them like a cycle, like a circle. This is a wave-top presentation because, as you've just heard from the Bob and Rob show, as you heard from Jack's keynote, as you heard from all the vendors who are downstairs, hopefully you had a chance to chat with some of them, there are so many technological tools and so many processes you can implement at your firm. If you're like me, leaving the Clio conference, you get back and you're full of ideas. I want to try this system and that system. I want to try this new Clio function. But how do you go from that inspiration to getting focus and then actually implementing those systems? We can't all leave with that high energy from ClioCon and get back and roll out 20 new features. In general, for organizations, that isn't going to work. And the larger our organizations get, the more they're like steering an oil tanker, right? We're not always as nimble as we want to be, and we have to think about how do we roll these out in a careful and constructive way that will benefit our entire team. So looking at our circle, we're going to talk about, do we understand the role of technology? Can we identify the needs and the opportunities that we have in our organization? With all that knowledge together, can we create a plan of how we'll implement bit by bit our new systems? As we implement, can we build buy-in with the team that we have and address some of the natural resistance we often face? And of course, can we measure our success and pivot as necessary, which brings us right back to the beginning of that cycle. The cycle of now saying, as we've implemented certain new technologies and processes, how do we understand the next generation of tools that are available to us, or the next step that we want to pursue? But let's step back for a moment. At Scale, we're a mission-driven law firm, and I know many of your law firms have a mission. And for us, that mission is transforming legal practice, a mission that aligns very well with Clio. And you heard Jack talk about that mission in the keynote presentation yesterday. But what does it mean to transform legal practice, and how does technology fit into that process? The first is, you've heard again and again this word friction. If you haven't heard it before, you've heard it in this conference all day yesterday and today. How do we decrease that friction, those little obstacles that cause a problem for the members of our team, that keep them from being effective in the work that they're doing? How do we increase the time available to members of our team? Of course, we heard from Bob and Rob talking about the efficiencies that come with using technology. As we free up time from one place, we can open it up and use it in another place. It can make us more effective and more efficient and more profitable as a law firm. New technologies can reduce barriers, and those barriers can be internal barriers, collaboration within your team, lawyer to lawyer, practice group to practice group, support staff, working with leadership, all up and down the chain of your organization. But technology can also reduce barriers between our organizations and the clients that we serve. Clients want to see increasing communication, increasing transparency, more opportunities that have their needs met by our organizations. And lastly, and importantly for me, we can create space for the members of our team. We all are working in the legal profession, and we want to be successful as an organization, but we want our fundamental teams to be healthy, mentally healthy, physically healthy. Using technology can free up space for our attorneys and members of our team to pursue other interests. We've seen this with the changes that came with COVID-19 and the move to remote work. Technology can enable us to spend more time with our families, with our friends, going outside, being healthier overall. So as we're thinking about technology as transformative in our organization, let's always keep in mind that efficiency isn't the only thing we care about. We want to empower everyone in our organization to have a better quality of life. Transforming legal practice means healthier practice overall. Technology can be a tool for that. Now, if we understand technology as transformation, that means we don't think of technology as simply taking the old methods of practice and making them a little bit better. We can easily fall into the trap of saying, how can I make this little process a little bit faster? Or we can say, is the process itself functioning? Is it serving the needs of our team members and the needs of our clients? Clients expect us to use new technologies. That's part of what motivates us to all be here. How can we use Clio as a platform better? How can we use the integrations more effectively? Our clients are driving us to implement new processes. And if we leave here and we're overwhelmed with all the potential options, so much that we don't implement any of them, we're not serving our clients well. Operational efficiency is driving our need to implement new technologies and processes. Again, those efficiencies are not simply taking previous tasks that we've done and making them a little bit more efficient, but thinking operationally overall in the organization. What needs are unmet? And we'll talk about actual needs and felt needs and how they both play into this. Giving us a competitive edge. Certainly, you just heard from Bob and Rob in their panel, if you were here, about the competitive edge that AI is bringing to our law firms. And you heard in Jack's keynote yesterday how the lawyers that master the use of AI are going to be the ones who are successful in the future and drive innovation in the law. So getting a competitive edge is a key part of implementing new processes and thinking what are the things that will distinguish us from other law firms that are about the same level or a little bit larger than ours. And lastly, there is the future of the law. Everyone here knows that legal practice is changing. Some of you have been lawyers for a year or 2 years. Some of you have been in the profession for decades. We've all seen momentous changes. Even if we just think back to 2 years ago and the launch of ChatGPT publicly, the ways that that has changed the operation of the law. So I think we can all agree, I hope we can all agree, that thinking about technology and changing our systems is critical, and we're driven to do it. But how do we do that? The first step is let's identify the needs and the opportunities that we have in our organization. And I would challenge you, contrary to some things I've heard at the conference, rather than starting with the client, start first with members of your team. What do the people on your team need? How will technology change the way that they operate? The very first thing we have to do, and for some of you, this is just a solo task, and for others, depending upon your organization, it's a small team task. Identify the existing obstacles that we're facing. Looking from top to bottom at our organization, how does the work flow currently? Now, if you're like me, the way that I like to do this is simply my iPad and a stylus, and I draw it all out. Maybe you're a pen and paper kind of person. Maybe you're a spreadsheet kind of person. But the key thing to take away is don't overcomplicate the process. We don't have to build a 20-slide PowerPoint deck to think through what the obstacles are in our organization. Rather, we need to take the time to look at how the work flows. How do clients come in? How do they move through the process? How do things work at your organization? Until we do this, we don't know where the obstacles are. But there's another step. Because from where we all sit, we might have a particular view of the organization. Sometimes being in leadership, we don't see what's happening at other levels of the organization. Sometimes, like me, I'm a trademark practitioner. I love trademark law. I do nothing with fintech and know nothing about fintech. So I have a limited ability to identify obstacles for a financial technology practice group or for a patent law practice group, I need to go out to my organization and find out what are the obstacles that my members of my team are facing. And as I do this, I'll caution you that we're often tempted to say, let's ask around, let's talk to our practice group leaders, let's talk to the people who are doing the work, get a one-on-one, see what information we can gather from them. And all of that is very useful. But lawyers are people. Members of your team are people, sometimes driven by concerns about their reputation, sometimes just nice people who don't want to give criticisms to the organization they're part of. And so having an anonymous method to get people to provide feedback is critical. Anonymous feedback is critical. You have to give someone the opportunity to freely say, what are the obstacles they're facing in the organization? What is the friction that they are experiencing? And as you do this, I'll just emphasize anonymity is key. It should be truly anonymous. Sometimes things appear to be, and they're somehow trackable inadvertently back to an email address, for example. It should be clear on its face that they're anonymous. And ask people to give feedback. And as you're asking them to tell you what are the obstacles and the frictions that they're facing, remember that survey fatigue is real. We don't need a 20-page or 20-question survey about every single thing that's wrong. But instead, tell me what obstacles you're facing. What are the frustrations you face day in and day out in our organization? And what you will find, if you're like me, is you will see a certain percent of that feedback and you'll say, that is spot on. That's exactly what we need to change. I'm so glad someone pointed that out. That's what I've been thinking. But then you'll see a lot where you'll go, that's not a real need. We don't need to fix that. Or even worse, we often go, that person does not understand the process on the back end. They're complaining about an issue, but they don't appreciate all the background work that goes into making those things happen, like conflicts checks or trust reconciliation, right? Not every lawyer in your organization knows how the operations work. And the larger you get, the more complex operations are. But I would caution you about disregarding and saying, I'm looking for the signal in the noise, and instead say, most of this feedback is signal. Some of it is an actual need, a need that you can see lines up with an objective issue in your organization, and some of it is a felt need, where a lawyer is expressing a friction or a problem that they're having. We want to list out and be aware of those felt needs, because as you will see as we get to future slides, understanding felt needs is what helps us begin the process of technology transformation in our firms. Next, we need to look to streamline. It's very tempting. Again, if you're like me, you come to ClioCon, you see all these tools, you go downstairs, you see all these vendors, and you want to sign up for this and try a demo for that. You get connected with this tool, implement AI in all these different ways. It's very exciting. There's so much new opportunity in the world of legal practice. But let's keep in mind all the tools that we already have. I myself was guilty for longer than I'd like to admit of not using many of the tools in Clio, not appreciating that I had some resources available to me that I wasn't using. So a great exercise for you as you're assessing your current obstacles, you're getting feedback of actual and felt needs, is to start listing out ways you could streamline. Many of us have been part of an organization, I certainly have been, where one tool brings in a whole bunch of client data, another tool is used to manage some of that client data, and there's some human being in the process who's looking at one screen and typing it into the other, right? This is a place to streamline. Look for tools that are duplicating each other. Look for tools that could potentially communicate with each other. And guess what? You don't need to fix it yet. You don't need to fix it. We're just getting a sense of what the landscape looks like. Lastly, you have to understand what tools are available to you. So I myself tend to go to many conferences and I see the vendor booths and I kind of walk like this. I'm hesitant to look at the vendors. I don't make eye contact. But you've heard from Bob and Rob in the last session, many people give compliments about the vendor booths here at ClioCon. And I'd encourage you, if you haven't yet done it, there's still some time left, get downstairs, start getting a sense of what tools are available to you. You're not committing to anything, you're understanding what's out there, what's available. You keep hearing about AI, but Who's offering it? How are they offering it? How could it potentially apply to your practice area? So this is a lot. This is a lot. We're already thinking about our obstacles. We're identifying our needs. We're streamlining. We're trying to understand the tools. Do not get caught up in all the dirty details. You're not creating this grand project that you have to present to the world. This is still you and maybe your small team getting an understanding of what the landscape is. And if all it is a spreadsheet that says tool, thing that it does, or tool, my notes, that is more than sufficient. Engage in the content. Engage in the goal of understanding, not the goal of presenting the data. We'll figure all that out later. Okay, so good. Hopefully we have a generally good sense of where the issues are in our organization, both actual and felt. We've identified some obstacles. We've looked for some chances to streamline. We've thought about what are some of the available tools. Now we have to really get pen to paper and start creating a roadmap. Yet again, you can be very tempted to go, uh-oh, this is my 6-month project. I have to create this giant roadmap of my organization. Don't fall into the trap of getting caught by all the details. Instead, develop an operational vision of your organization. Now, my recommendation to you is 3 years is a great window. If you're a mid to large size law firm, 3 years out is about as far as you can realistically predict, right? 3 years, if you think about it, October 2027 is not that far from now. That's right down the road. But 3 years gives you time to start implementing processes and start shifting and changing the way you're operating as an organization. It's not a full transformation, but it gives you a window to work with. If 3 years feels just too crazy to you, I would say fine, drop it down to 2. But you cannot really start to see the benefits of technology transformation in your organization in less than 2 years. Even with the quick wins we'll talk about, it takes time. Sort of like marketing, right? Marketing will always tell you they're growing trees, right? It doesn't just happen instantly. It takes time to see the effects. As you're building out this map, this vision of how you think things should flow, you're talking first generally and then more specifically as you can about how the work should flow, what a good operational flow would look like in your organization. And if you're in a larger firm where you have multiple practice groups, multiple areas, just choose one. We're not revamping our entire organization. We're learning the steps and the process to implement new technologies. Seek vendor assistance. As you're talking to vendors, one of the things you should ask them is, have you served an organization that's my size or similar in size to my organization? Another thing you can ask is, how will you help us to implement these things? And how have you implemented it in other organizations like mine? We're just gathering information, but this is a chance for you to think. I need to change the way that my billing works. Who is out there that can help me with this? How have they implemented changes with my peers in the community? How could that benefit me? Let me think about that in my visioning. Next, as you're building your roadmap, prioritize quick wins. Look for those early things that you could change that people will feel a noticeable difference very quickly. Sometimes it's as basic as saying, we just need a form that when people put information in, that information goes over to a certain part of my team. It can be a 10-minute project. But the point is, as we're developing our roadmap, our 2 or 3 year roadmap of transforming the way we're using technology, put things towards the beginning that we can get done more easily. Why? Well, one, you will get frustrated. If you have to launch on a 6-month plan to try to get this one new thing implemented in your firm, you'll begin to get frustrated. Other people in your organization may become more skeptical of the operational change you're trying to implement. So find those early wins, those things that are easy. Oftentimes, a great place to find those wins are the felt needs, not the actual needs. These actual needs are often harder to solve. It requires more logistics. It requires more technology shift. Sometimes felt needs is as simple as speeding up a process a little bit, adding one more form, or even making more clear why it is that something operates the way that it does. And remember that success fuels success. At larger organizations, the world is very different than smaller firms that are growing. When I first started my own firm before I was acquired by Scale, my firm, we just had a few lawyers. and I was the benevolent dictator at my firm. I could wake up in the morning and say, I'm changing this whole process. I could hit the keyboard and change up whatever I wanted to change. But at a larger organization, there's processes. We have to go through leadership. We have to go through budget. We have to get approval. There's implementation that has to ripple through an entire organization. But success fuels success. Quick wins, earlier, easier things for us to get done will help get more opportunities for funding, more opportunities for buy-in from members of our team, and critically from those in leadership who have the ability to authorize these changes. So great. We understand technology, its transformative role, and how it can help our organizations be more efficient and effective and better for all the members of our team. We've thought about the obstacles and the actual needs and the felt needs. We've thought about the issues. We've built out our roadmap to start getting a sense of how we can transform our organization. And now it's time to start doing the implementation. And guess what? That can be hard. It can be hard to implement new systems. And sometimes the littlest things we try to implement we'll get some pushback from. But that's okay. We can use some ways to build our buy-in and to overcome resistance and to try to implement these transformations. And I want to point to, we are here to make life better. If you roll back to the beginning where I said, hold for a moment on thinking about the end client and think about the people in your team, we want to make the organizational experience of people in your team better. When we improve that, those efficiencies, those changes, those transformations will filter out and will benefit clients. So, number one, work with leaders. I have been an Army officer now for almost 16 years. The Army, we have a very clear hierarchy. There is no doubt who the leader is. It's so clear that we have it right on the clothing that we wear, on our uniform, right? We know rank, we know position. It is very clear what the official hierarchy is. It's also very clear, like all human organizations, that there are natural leaders. Sometimes those leaders are the people who just have a lot of knowledge. When they speak, people listen because they know what they're talking about. They have this bench, this depth of experience that no one else has. And sometimes natural leaders just have a personality about them. They feel like they're committed to the organization, they're helping everyone out, they're more collective-minded, they're pushing things forward. And those two kinds of leaders are not always the same as the official leadership. As we're talking about transforming our organizations and bringing in new technologies, let's identify who those natural leaders are who can be part of that process. So as we're thinking about, well, where do I start? Which potential place in my roadmap could I start implementing new technologies? Maybe you already know someone in your organization who's either very tech savvy, is really thinking about these issues, they seem excited about it. Maybe they're not tech savvy at all, but they're a leader of a practice group or of a project or of an area in your organization where you know that they carry a certain amount of pull. And by getting them on board with an early process, a quick win, right? An early success, you know that will trickle out through the organization and build some energy. Look for those natural leaders. If you don't have those natural leaders, it might be your job to work on becoming one of those leaders. And the ways you can do it is taking seriously all the stuff we've talked about already. Listening for obstacles, identifying those actual and felt needs, becoming the person who in your organization takes seriously the need for technological transformation and wants to do it for the benefit of your people, not just for the benefit of the bottom line. We have to train to culture. As we're implementing a new system, the Bob and Rob panel, they were talking, at one point they were talking about mail, paper mail. And they were saying how some people still love to get paper mail, right? That's part of the culture of that organization, that paper mail culture. Other organizations are very paperless, inherently, automatically. That's just where they are. Some organizations are very much about face-to-face contact. Others are very comfortable with virtual or remote work. But we have to understand that any process we're implementing has to be implemented within the context of the culture of our organization. Processes can change far faster than culture can. Culture shifts. Culture does not jump. changing the culture of your organization will take a long time. Certainly, we're talking about that initial 3-year roadmap. So let's not come up with new implementations of technology that's going to butt against that culture, but rather nest it within that culture. Understand, okay, we are a culture that we want to have this paper mail. Well, why are we getting this paper mail? What does that do for us? What's the benefit of that? What are the detriments to that? And then as we're implementing new processes, let's talk specifically to that cultural aspect and understand, is it because there's a concern about trusting technology? Is it because there's a thing that happened in the past where someone got burned and the organization adopted this culture of still having paper? Think about those things as you're implementing any new process. And we have to welcome feedback. We have to ask, okay, I want to launch this new thing. I'm going to start working with my natural leaders. I'm going to be thinking about my culture and how to shift. We have to welcome feedback in that process. And that feedback will often come initially from the leaders who you're asking to support your integration of new technologies, or that small group that's having the initial experience of it. But we have to welcome feedback, including feedback that says, I'm not sure this is the right place for us to focus. Now, as we're going along and we're implementing, that's the longer phase. That's the phase where we're really going to have to settle in, be welcoming that feedback, be working with the natural leaders, and trying to get these new processes implemented. But as we do so, we have to think about, are we being successful in the goal that we set for ourselves? We said we wanted to change up something in our organization. Is it working? Well, first, how would we even know that it's working? If we recognize from the very beginning what I said, that we oftentimes have a blind spot. We don't always see what other practice groups are experiencing or what other people in our team are facing for their actual and felt needs. We have to ask difficult questions. So again, I love anonymous feedback. I'm a big fan of giving people anonymous surveys, very short, 1 or 2 questions, long answer, fill in whatever you want. And then I sort of think about it and use that as my feedback. But we can also ask difficult questions directly of people that we trust, like the natural leaders who we're working with. What is frustrating about this process? What is frustrating about the implementation we're trying to roll out? Where am I failing in messaging this out to the people on our team? How can I improve? We have to ask difficult questions of our team to get the true answers, to really help us to figure out, am I doing this the right way? Because if you remember back to this notion of this is a cycle, right? And we're doing this again and again, this may be our first time through the cycle. We have to define to measure. I, again, am not a big fan of getting lost in the details. Some of you might love KPIs. Got it. Go for it. Set your KPI, determine what the KPI is, get the graph, get the weekly KPI bar chart, right? I get it. That's great. But if you're the person who's driving this process at your organization, you have to do what works primarily for you. If you're trying to just measure for other people as a presentation method and not thinking about understanding the underlying content, the underlying issues, the actual obstacles, then you're spending a lot of energy you shouldn't be spending. But we do need to define to measure, right? Jack said yesterday, what gets measured gets managed. Think about it simply. What would success look like if one of the needs I identified was communication with clients, and I recognize that we're slow at getting back to our clients. And I say, well, we have to figure out a new process or a new technology, and we're going to set the goal of getting back to our clients within 24 hours. That's our goal. We'll answer any client correspondence within 24 hours. Great. Well, how are you going to measure that? Start defining it. Start figuring out how you'll measure it. Because we have to have a sense of what we're looking to do and what success looks like to know if we're being successful or not. And once we have that, we can be more agile and say, guess what? You will never get back to all of your clients within 24 hours. It just won't happen. Maybe it's a weekend. Maybe it's a holiday. Maybe it's a complicated question and giving a fast answer could be worse than giving a slower answer. Or maybe there's just something else, there's some other reason. Maybe you're training the client and going, look, I cannot be responsive to you all the time within 24 hours. So be agile and rethink, all right, how are we going to change up our measurement of success? And in that process, we can draw new maps. That roadmap that you created does not have to be set in stone for your 2 years or 3 years. That roadmap is your guide, is your general path you're going to follow. And being agile means thinking about, maybe I need to shift in my roadmap a little bit. Maybe we need to change the goals that we're trying to get to. Or maybe I thought it was about communication with the client generally, but it's really about a very specific type of client or a specific type of communication. For us at scale, transforming legal practice is a top-to-bottom question. That's what fuels our desire for technological innovation. We're constantly trying to think about, how does our mission drive this goal for transformation? And as we're thinking through this, we're trying to be honest with ourselves and with our team. Are we solving the problems that the team actually has? And I will tell you, it is very easy to begin this whole process and then quickly get off track. And one of the most common places we get off track is we get so focused on the KPI or that one measurement that we forget that the whole reason we're doing this is to make lives better in our organization. We're trying to make life easier for our people so that they can be more effective and more efficient and have some bandwidth, have some space to explore the personal sides of their life, not just be lost in work, right? We're addressing those actual needs and those felt needs. And we're thinking through what are the effective changes that we can make to improve our organization overall. That's how we stay competitive. That's how we move into the future of the law together. So I would encourage you, as you're thinking about this cycle and implementing these new technologies, don't get lost in the weeds. Always remember why it is you're doing it and reach out to those resources that you have. Reach out to the vendors who can assist you, including, of course, Clio and the folks at Clio who can support you with these new implementations. Reach out to your natural leaders in your organization. Find those people who want to be part of this transformation and bring them into the process. And remember, again, your job, it's servant leadership, right? You're serving the organization, helping to make the organization better. Don't get lost in the details. Focus on improving the lives of all of your team members. With that, I think I'm right at my time of 40 minutes, and I'd like to see if there's any questions. And if you have any questions, I'd ask you to please go to the microphone so that those who are listening on the streaming side could hear more about this.
Hey there, I am Hannah Bree Bell and have a family law firm here in Austin. And I was thinking, as we're here, several members of our team are here, and we're realizing a lot of the tech that we currently use needs to change. And I joke about it that we built the firm on tech that suited me, which was an intersection of fastest, easiest, and cheapest at once. And now there are like about 40 of us. And what worked when there were 4 of us, I mean, we've just sort of duct taped our way. So my question is, your thoughts on implementing change when a lot needs to be changed? And do you sort of say like, whoop, this is our new set of stuff we're doing, come on everybody? Or do you pick one, but I'm afraid if you only pick one little thing at a time, you're never not talking to them about some new system and everyone will murder us.
I'm very sympathetic. First of all, congratulations on your success. I'm growing like that. That's wonderful news.
Thank you.
And I'm very sympathetic to having a system that you kind of built or have worked with, and it was great for you early on. And as you're growing, your organization is shifting away from it and no longer matches your needs. And I totally understand this concern about if I start every week rolling out a new system, but it's not about that. What we don't want is the good idea fairy. That's like my favorite army metaphor, the good idea fairy, where every week, especially if you have an organization that's primarily led by one person or 2 people, there's this thing of Monday emails frustrating. So you're like, change the email system. And Wednesday,
I have no idea.
You have no idea what I'm talking about, right? 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 I totally get that. So one of the ways to do that is to really take that initial time to think through the obstacles and get the actual and felt needs. 40 people is enough for you to do an anonymous survey and get back some anonymous feedback and start figuring out where are the real pressure points, the real frictions that you can fix in the short term to start making life better. The other thing I'd say is if you have a trusted person in the organization, a non-decision-making person who is that sort of natural leader in the organization, even if maybe they're just a natural leader to you, they're just someone you've always trusted and worked with, it's good to get them to help you out. You have to, of course, remember that oftentimes those people, if they've come up with you in an organization, they want to support you, right? And they want to support your vision. And it takes a little bit of work to say, let me put aside my vision for a moment and start hearing from this trusted person and figure out where the frictions are that we can identify. The last thing I'd say is don't throw your whole system out and start from the ground up, right? Find ways to get those quick wins, those easier successes, because what you're learning in this process is how to do transformation, right? You're learning a new process, a new method. It's almost like this in and of itself is a new process for you, thinking about technology proactively rather than reactively.
Well, to me, it seems like it's a change that intersects with every user within your firm versus a lot of other changes we do may or may, like it'll affect the lit team side. That doesn't necessarily get to the sales folks or the HR folks. But when you start messing with people's tech, it like affects everybody. And communicating that, I mean, it's hard.
Well, that is true. I will be the first to tell you, we've gone through some recent transformations in our document management system and in file management. And it's very hard to say, well, I only want to kind of beta test this out with a small group of people because you're fundamentally changing your document management system. But you can find creative ways to say, help me to test this out a little bit. Find a small group, even if sometimes it feels artificial in the short term, where you're actually, it almost feels like you're creating a whole new system and you go, is this really saving time? What you're doing is testing out another approach. And although it may take a little bit more work in the short term, you can iron out some of the wrinkles before you roll it out to your organization overall.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
Hi, I'm a staff member. What would you recommend to people? So in our situation, I think I can say this because my boss isn't here, but he's looking to watch this.
He's not gonna lie.
So in our, I know, right? In our situation, the biggest obstacle to implementing new technology has come from management. Like, for example, we did not have a shared calendar that functioned as a shared calendar until last year, which is crazy. We didn't have Outlook until last year. So our biggest obstacle in implementing new technology in our firm has been convincing management that this is necessary. And so what would you recommend to people such as myself who are tasked with convincing our boss, hey, we really need this?
That's a great question. I'm sure no one else has ever had that scenario in their lives, right? And so you're speaking in part to culture, right? There's a culture in the organization that maybe is not as tech savvy or not as tech friendly.
Not as open to feedback as you are.
Not as open to feedback, right? But you yourself, by being here, by being at the microphone, are a natural leader within this process. And unfortunately, it falls to you to figure out, how can I start showing my leadership how this will be beneficial for the organization overall? Oftentimes when we have a culture that's kind of fixed and we're resisting these new changes, it's because it's always worked for us. That's just the way the organization has always worked this way. It works out well for us. There's no need for me to change. But perhaps showing how the firm could become more efficient or more effective, maybe addressing questions of profitability depending upon how your leadership is motivated. Or maybe even saying, look, can I have permission to try this out in a small area? Let's try this one thing that could be a quick win, right? Is there something small you could take on where instead of the leadership feeling like this was a threat to their culture of how the organization works, you're just trying out a new effort in a small line. And if you're successful there, it now gives you that momentum, that flywheel, in a sense that Jack was talking about yesterday, to go back and say, look, this was successful. Can we try another project? Can we expand this a little bit? Does that sound fair?
That's really good. Baby steps.
Baby steps, yes. Please.
Hi. So I'm in patent law in Washington State, and we have about 130 of us at our firm. We have recently gone from our old system into a new system. 4 months later, decided it wasn't the system for us. Went back into our old one. Trying to convince people to even move forward into a new system in the future is almost impossible. Any recommendations towards, I guess, making that shift and getting people on board? We have trademark and corporate litigation and everything in our firm, so it's kind of a math deal. Trademark has decided not to go back into our old system, went into another new one that was catering towards them. So, and some of the leadership isn't there anymore because of that implementation. Just trying to find a way to adjust to it and figure it out.
Yeah, so I will actually say something that may sound a little bit contradictory to some of what I said during this presentation, which is as an organization grows, especially the size you're talking about, sometimes we find that the problem is we're trying to force everyone into one tech stack, and that doesn't make sense. At our firm, for example, I coordinate the trademark practice, and we have one docketing system that works wonderfully for us. When I first came on board, they wanted us to use this patent system that also did trademark docketing, and I thought it was horrible. It was horrendous. But what we learned in identifying that friction was that it wasn't that that tool was bad or this tool was bad, is that we were at a size where we had to have different tools for different practice groups. So I have to wonder if that's part of what came up, right? Trying to force a one size fits all, which oftentimes is driven by economics, right? You go, we're already paying for this thing. Let's get everyone on board. But you said 130?
Yeah, about 130.
Yeah. When you're at 130, I think you'll start quickly finding that you may need to think about tools based on practice group or practice area and not rolling them out to the entire organization.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Please.
So I'm going to build off of a question a prior person had, also staff member, paralegal. My question is more when the leadership and the partners consider tech to be the paralegal administrator job. And so when we tell people, so the partners will say, hey, that sounds great, let's do that. But they are not then setting the example. And so other attorneys and senior staff look at that and go, well, I don't have to do it then. I can get away with not doing it. So what advice do you have?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things built into that scenario, right? I mean, the first thing built in is I'm very familiar with the trend of people going like, we should totally do this, and looking at admin around and saying, well, maybe someone should do this, but I'm not going to do this. I'm busy lawyering it up, right? Not a great way of approaching building a law firm, right? Because at the end of the day, there should be a structured leadership at your firm. If there isn't a structured leadership, now we get into a whole, that is not this presentation. That is a how to structure your law firm to be effective as a business. But I would say, again, the fact that you're here and you're at the microphone suggests that you care about this and you're thinking about this and you want to see forward progress. Are there natural leaders at your firm that maybe they aren't in the leadership, but they're people who the leadership would listen to, where you can say, can we work on some of these projects together? Now, that's in terms of getting new things implemented. And there may not be people who you can identify. Maybe you're going to have to sit back and say, well, maybe there's some people I can approach that are more tech savvy who would have a natural interest in this. They just haven't thought about it. And you can figure out how to get them on board with the process. I would say that getting out of admin running that process can be very difficult. And the reason why is oftentimes I find it's that the organizational leadership doesn't want to spend. They view transformation as a net loss, right? They go, I'm already paying you. Why can't you do this stuff? None of my lawyers want to do it. I think you have to work to show how it can improve operations and profitability for the organization, unfortunately. And also how it improves overall health. Now, I don't know if that's really a good answer to your question, because I have to wonder if there's an organizational aspect there also. That unfortunately is not That's an obstacle that you face. It is almost preliminary to implementing good transformational change. Okay. Anything else? We have a couple more minutes, please. My Buc-ee's sweatshirt. There you go.
I'm the managing attorney at a much smaller law firm than what they're talking about, but I was hoping that some of the stuff would just transfer for me. When you have resistant staff to this kind of change, and you're looking at a 2 to 3 year timeline, I mean, what would be your recommendation to consider maybe that resistant staff isn't the right fit anymore if I'm unable to get the culture change moving? 2 to 3 years is a really long time to have somebody fight me the whole time.
Got it. Okay. So I'm a little bit off script on this topic, but I will say, having grown a law firm and having dealt with the hiring and firing process and trying to find the right people, my failure was always not recognizing early enough that these were the wrong people for my organization, right? They always say be slow to hire, quick to fire. And I was like kind of quick to hire and really slow to fire because I felt very empathetic with my employees and I wanted them to stick with me.
And it's expensive.
But the reality is that organizations cannot grow unless leadership makes the hard decisions and finds the right people to build the foundation that you grow upon, right? You will get trapped by the people that you have if they're truly resistant to the changes you're trying to implement. Now, all of that said, I do think sometimes the resistance that we feel is a failure to properly think through what are the actual and the felt needs. Now, in your scenario, it might be much harder to get anonymous feedback, right? If you have 4 people or 5 people, it really doesn't feel very anonymous, right? But you still need to find ways to ask, what are the frustrations that you're feeling? Put aside a little bit of your own ego envisioning and try to get a sense of, is this something that can be fixed by you as a leader to get them on board with this transformation? Or are they truly so resistant that they're just not a good match for your organization? And in that case, do you want to grow or don't you, right? If you want to grow, you've got to find the right people. And the wrong people are far more expensive over time than finding the right people.
So no magic number?
Darn it. I wish I had a magic answer for you. Anybody else?
Hello. I'm with Hannah at Henry Bell Law, and I wanted to try to pick your brain a little bit about how you actually implement rollouts. So like we're talking about switching from texting to Microsoft Teams, and we're trying to do one of those like start small things. So talking about instead of dumping everyone into Teams and hey, figure this out, maybe just start with chats. But my question is like, are you, do I need to find someone that can then do a whole tutorial for the team about every little deep dive into Teams? Or how do you like manage rollouts in a way for everyone to kind of learn, like processes, video tutorials, that kind of stuff?
Great question. So a lot of the times the frustrations we have with implementing new tools is that we have a culture in our organization that does not necessarily match up with the tool. So we go, everyone keeps emailing each other. We've got to have better communication day in, day out. Let's implement Slack or Microsoft Teams. And everyone, we're on Slack now, right? And you will very quickly find that 90% of your people will go, yeah, that's nice, right? I'm not going to be on Slack, right? So one, it is true, there's always this initial training period that happens. And I would keep in mind, we often forget, especially if you're more tech savvy, you go, but we had an onboarding video, right? But people don't remember. They have to play with the tool for a while. They have to get into it. So the first thing I'd say is, if people are adopting that tool, have multiple opportunities for training. And occasionally, unfortunately, you need to make some of those obligatory. Everyone needs to put pens down and come to this training, because otherwise many people will not come to it at all. But it needs to be an ongoing process. It can take months to get people used to a new tool, and they have to use it regularly. The other thing is, we didn't talk about this in this presentation, but I've heard the phrase said throughout the conference, single source of truth, this notion of where is the action happening? Where does the information come from? And so leadership can start shifting people towards using tools by shifting those tools to being the single source of truth, where you say, this is where we talk about the cases that we have. We establish a channel for this litigation, and that's where all the conversation happens. And when people they keep emailing back and forth, you've got to say, get on the Slack channel or get on the Teams chat, upload the file to the Teams chat and, send them the link. There is a little bit of a forcing function that has to happen. So it is very clear, people in your organization will not always be hip, hip, hooray for brand new technology. But that's where natural leaders are part of the process, right? Trying to get buy-in. And the last thing I'd say is remember this whole quick wins and the value we get. Find ways to get people to see things changing the organization that make them feel like things are moving in the right direction. And now they're more willing to go along with other transformations that are happening. So they may not care about Microsoft Teams or Slack or chat, but what do they care about? What is the team feeling a frustration over? Let's give them a little bit of those fixes, get them on board and say, look, we're all moving in a good direction. Our entity is moving forward into the future of the law. Come be a part of this. Don't be a part of that anymore. Let's go. Let's change up our organization.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think I have 2 minutes left if this timer is correct.
How you doing? My name is David Schultes. I'll be the bad guy of the group, but I'm just curious where IT fits in this whole scale. How, considering most IT will be responsible for the implementation, the support, the security, which I didn't hear mentioned at all. So how involved should IT be in the entire process between staff and the overall choice?
Yeah, great question. The role of IT in this whole process. This varies dramatically based upon the size of your organization. Whether you have internal IT or external IT, is your IT primarily coming from the vendor, your information technology support primarily coming from the vendors who you're hiring, or do you have folks on staff who are helping to kind of run things internally? IT is critical to this process in terms of getting people on board, getting training, and I would say identifying where those friction points are between different systems. So taking the time to talk to your IT folks if they're internal. External IT, the problem is they tend to get stovepiped, right? It's one vendor handling one thing and one vendor handling another. So it's a little bit more difficult when you're in that magic middle ground where you're bringing on these new technologies, but you don't have an in-house person who can really help you to run that process. Unfortunately, that often becomes you. And your job is to kind of quarterback the team and go, okay, IT, I need you to help me to figure out the mechanics here of integrating these systems. What can you do for me for training? And if you can't provide training, what resources do I have to help train up my team to adopt? And I know security has not been talked about. I tried to avoid talking about any specific technologies here, but right, there are significant issues that come up with the integration of any new technology in your firm.
Especially the involvement in the decision-making process.
Absolutely. So, right, say we have like 30 seconds. Say more about that, about your concern about decision-making.
So a lot of times, no offense, but people will choose products and then ask IT to make it work without the involvement of IT first for a successful rollout.
Yes. Yes. So I will punt on this. And the way I'll punt on it is say, going back to the earlier slides, right? What we're not doing is good idea fairy of, I just think we should do this thing. Let's roll it out. We have to do a good analysis of our organization, of our strengths and weaknesses, of what the resources are that are available to us, and use all of that to make an informed decision where we're getting feedback throughout the process. I have absolutely been in an organization that said, we're doing this now, and IT goes, you can't do that. Those systems don't connect. We go, oh, there's an API. You'll figure it out, right? So I absolutely hear the frustration. Doing a good inventory of our systems and understanding who's available to help us is critical for us to be successful in this process.
Thank you.
I thank everybody for coming to this presentation. I hope it was helpful for all of you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.